Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. We used to have a feature here on the podcast on our FOMO Fridays that was called the Doge Report. And it was pretty popular because it confirmed what we all knew for years was happening. Mountains of taxpayer money was being wasted, and there was no accountability. It was a part of the political game that was being played. Take in billions of dollars from the taxpayers, give it to your friends, and they will support you and give you back money to get reelected, or even worse, for your personal bank account. Well, no one can tell me what services the government does that can't be done better and more efficient in the public sector. Every time the government gets involved with a particular industry, that industry spirals down and gets more expensive, and it becomes a loser financially. I could give you example after example. Government almost never holds itself accountable, and the incentive structure is always to not solve the problem, but to, perpetuate it as the demand for money from taxpayers requires that. Well, time after time, when you look just under the hood of a government program, you find corruption, you find fraud, and you find mismanagement. An example of that is here from a Daily Wire investigative report by Luke Rosiak. And he looked under the hood of just one minority contract. He says that Rhonda Valles is an aspiring California musician who once played in a band with her ex-lover, Monica Salke. Now, in between writing and performing songs, Valles and Salke formed a company that purported it to make clothing or clothes. Now, the company never produced a stitch, but the federal government paid it $19 million. Yeah, the spectacle demonstrates the absurdity of 8A contracting law, which requires that 5% of all federal government contracts be set aside for minority, women-owned, and other disadvantaged businesses. That's a requirement. The program, which Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said this month has resulted in $100 million contracts going out the door without competitive bidding nearly every day, and has led to paydays for just flagrant middlemen who use their disadvantaged status to win government contracts, only to subcontract the work to larger firms. And here's the case here. Valles and Salke registered a company called Romo Productions with the Small Business Administration as a self-certified small disadvantaged business, a woman-owned business, and a Hispanic American-owned business. Now, according to her music biography, Valles' father is German, Irish, and Spanish. That certification, which gave it a fast track to government contracts, was the business. Its website dedicated more space to the Small Business Administration's 8A logos than its own name. Quote, Romo Productions offers two advantages: quality, scaled production, and women-owned small business. This means government buyers can meet their small business set-aside needs and receive well-built productions that are delivered on schedule. That's what their profile said. Also, quote, I got this government contract. Do you know anyone with a factory who can help me perform it? Yeah, that was also a part, not on the website, not on the profile, But between 2009 and 2017, multiple military branches agreed to pay up to, get this, $72 million to that firm, ultimately shelling out just under $19 million to produce physical training outfits. Federal spending records show this, and some were awarded without competition as an 8A sole source, while others were set aside for small businesses. But Romo Productions never had the infrastructure to produce clothes. Brad Thompson, he's a white male to whom Velez subcontracted the work. He recalls how she first approached him. And this is what she said. She said, I got this government contract. Do you know anyone with a factory who can help me perform it? She was literally living in her car, is what he told the Daily Wire. He said, I can help you. Thompson's company, BT Apparel, was one of the 3 factories that produced clothing for Romo Productions. Thompson's sent the clothing to a space where Velez's band practiced, and she forwarded the packages on to the military. That's what he said. Quote, she never owned a machine. I had 100 employees, he said. The whole 8A thing is a farce. During that time, Velez and Salke performed their song Token, which included the lyrics, I need a token. Shut up, boy. Don't you be my token. Won't you be my token? Well, government inspectors visited Thompson's factory to ensure compliance with rules such as the Berry Amendment, which requires military products to be made in the United States. Thompson says he heard Velez giving the impression that she owned it. She said, I started to think there was something fraudulent going on, he said. He hired a lawyer to obtain a copy of the government contract using public record laws and found that Velez was obligated to own the facilities that were performing the work. The military had apparently never verified that she did. Once Velez realized that Thompson was onto the scheme, a common occurrence in minority contracting, by the way, and it's called a pass-through. And well, she demanded he give her ownership of his business, which would make her more than just simply a middlewoman. Quote, sell me 10% of your business for $1 and I'll keep giving you work, is what he recalled her saying. The owners of the other 2 factories also began to suspect that Velez was just simply siphoning government dollars as a middlewoman. And Velez used legal threats and the prospect of withholding work to keep them as indentured servants. Get this, she drafted a letter intended for signature by Thompson that said, quote, I, Brad Thompson, have no further interest in obtaining pricing information from the USMC with respect to the above stated contract, unquote. Can you imagine? Another document reviewed by the Daily Wire with blank signature lines for the owners of the 3 factories read, we believe that what is best for Romo is best for us. We do not now or ever want to make you think that we would try to take anything away from you, unquote. Well, Thompson likened the move to extortion and said when he refused to sign over ownership of his business, Velez abruptly pulled the work from his factory and even cast a curse on him. Yeah. Quote, within 3 weeks, it was all gone because I wouldn't play ball, he said. Velez sued the second factory, Paradise Sewing, asking that it, quote, be permanently restrained and enjoined from using misappropriated confidential information, unquote. To support her case, she actually filed a contract that seemed to lay out her intent to commit a set-aside contracting pass-through scheme. And Valles later filed a statement to the judge complaining about her own lawyer because he, quote, told me I was not going to win, and, quote, that I was behaving like a 3-year-old. she literally submitted this to the judge. Well, in 2018, a California appeals court ordered her to pay Paradise attorney's fees, and Romo Productions actually collapsed at that point. But it's unclear that the federal government ever, if the federal government ever sanctioned it. Romo's website says it has a A+ contract pass performance rating and received a certificate of appreciation from the Marine Corps. Valles told the Daily Wire via email that she is, quote, more interested in the health of the planet, feminine energy, or yin, and cooperative kindness rather than male-dominated competitive evil war profiteers. She's great. Quote, in a stupid male-dominated world, especially this world, being a woman alone is a disadvantage, is what she added. Rallying against the evil feudal lords, evil Jewish slavery is still here, unquote. She said she is starting a coalition for women to run the planet. Peace and light and love like the orca whales. Raise the frequency of the planet. Male energy is heavy and warlike and long overdue for reduction, unquote. Yeah, this is the woman who got $19 million from the military. A Department of War spokesman declined to discuss Romo Productions, of course, but speaking on 8A contracts earlier this month, Hegseth actually noted that, quote, in many, many instances, these societal disadvantaged businesses don't even do work. They take a 10%, 20%, sometimes 50% fee off the top, and then pass the contract off to a giant consulting firm. Well, we're doing away with these pass-through schemes, Hegseth said, vowing that contracts not benefiting the lethality would simply be ended. After the fallout, Thompson's company looked into getting government contracts itself, but he found that bureaucrats seemed to knowingly write contracts that, well, necessitated middlemen in order to meet their small and disadvantaged business quotas. It's like procure apparel with an Under Armour logo. Obviously, they should just get them from Under Armour, he said. The Romo Productions contract was for the procurement of New Balance clothes, something only New Balance, which is not a small business, obviously, had the license to produce. To convince New Balance to allow other factories to produce clothes with its logo, the company had to be paid a license fee that gave it the same profit as if the contract had gone directly to it, he said. With Romo Productions gone, Valles now markets herself as the Oz behind the curtain of many of the industry's top made in the USA Berry compliant technical apparel brands from 2008 to present. That's how she put it. She says she consults with other companies that want to do business with the military to help them with sourcing and compliance, as she says. Well, Valles' brand also broke up, as did her relationship with Salke. Both women are still seeking fame and fortune. Salke has pivoted to Christian pop. A song she wrote with Valles might well have been about the time the United States government put a California beach bum on a fast track to the military industrial complex because she had a Spaniard grandparent saying, color me red, color me white, color me black, just color me right. But this was just one minority contract, just one. This investigation just covered that one contract that was originally for $72 million. Turned out that it paid out $19 million just as a pass-through, even though she didn't sew a stitch. But what about fraud and all this in other minority contracting? Well, more than 1,000 firms that could get no bid contracts. When I say no bid contracts, I'm talking about the fact that there's nobody that bids on this contract saying, hey, I'll do it for less, or I'll do it for better, or whatever. They just simply go to a particular firm without any kind of competition whatsoever. So more than 1,000 firms that could get no bid contracts from the federal government because they are owned by purportedly disadvantaged minorities have been banned from the program now after they missed a deadline to turn over anti-fraud documents. Yes, we're talking about more than 1,000 of these firms are now banned because they won't turn over anti-fraud documents. The documents were requested by the Small Business Administration because of the frequency of pass-through scams where minority fronts get contracts, then have large or white-owned businesses do the work while keeping a cut. The now suspended firms received more than, with a B, $5 billion in federal money in the last 4 years. This is what the Small Business Administration said. And make up, they made up a quarter of all contractors getting preference under the so-called 8A law. Here's a quote. The Trump administration has acted from day one to dismantle the discriminatory agenda that put white small business owners at a disadvantage and to crack down on the fraud and corruption that proliferates within DEI programs. This is what the SBA Administrator Kelly Loeffler said in a statement. And she said, today we are suspending over 1,000 8A firms who have refused to provide basic documents that every legitimate business should have on hand. The Senate Committee on Small Business held a hearing on waste, fraud, and abuse tied to the 8A program, and during which this reporter testified on the widespread fraud that existed around it. Under the law, 5% of contracts must be reserved for disadvantaged businesses, which President Joe Biden increased to 15%. Minorities with less than millions of dollars were automatically considered disadvantaged, as were all women. Scrutiny of the long-running 8A program picked up in earnest after a black businessman pleaded guilty to obtaining $500 million in contracts from USAID by bribing an official. $1 million is what the bribe was for. The official had the discretion to steer the contracts directly to Walter Barnes' firm, Visance, because of the 8A. Journalist James O'Keefe also caught an official with a purported Native American firm on camera bragging about how they got $100 million and simply paid a large company $35 million to do the actual work. Yeah, that's good margin if you can get it, right? On December 5th, Loeffler ordered all 8A firms to turn over detailed records, including payroll and bank statements. It has been an open secret in D.C. for decades that minority contractors get millions of dollars while having only 1, 2, or 3 people on staff, with the real work being done by large white-owned companies that are euphemistically referred to as partners or mentors. That means simply checking that firm's actually had check and see if they actually had employees, and that would have been enough to expose many for exploiting the system. Now, going through all of those records would have been just a Herculean task, one simply seemingly possible only through artificial intelligence. But it turned out that the SBA didn't even need to. Many fraudsters appeared to self-identify by simply refusing to cooperate. Yeah, the endemic fraud meant that the program was not even meaningfully meeting the goals liberals hoped for. The practice of no bid contracting also dries up costs and lowers quality, but conservatives also opposed it on ideological grounds, with the courts making clear that the decades-old program has to change or end. After a court said the practice of assuming that all minorities are disadvantaged was unconstitutional, the Biden administration began awarding the status based on essays in which people were asked to list instances of discrimination that they faced. SBA declined to provide the Daily Wire with the essays, citing privacy, even though, I mean, hey, it's a government organization, right? Everything should be out and open. But this indicated there was no attempt to verify whether the claim in the essays were true. They were just simply trying to hide things here. The SBA said that veterans who also get contracting preferences were waiting for approval because the Biden administration diverted resources to approving minority firms. Alaska's Republican senators secretly went to bat for the DEI program because big military contracts go to firms that call themselves Alaskan Native firms. So they were like, oh, well, we can't then say that, we can't do this because our state's getting money. Well, it's the fraud is not just in the federal government; it's in all government. And if you don't even have to look very far, it's not something that you're like, man, this is so difficult to understand. In fact, we've seen a lot of scandal taking place in the childcare industry, particularly out of Minnesota, but not just Minnesota. But Heather Madden, who is the policy staff director at Independent Woman, she wrote a piece here that I thought covered this really well. And she said, following the massive fraud uncovered in Minnesota, empty buildings advertising themselves as daycares funded by the taxpayer's dime, Vice President J.D. Vance's announcement of a Department of Justice task force to investigate abuse of public benefit programs is both necessary and welcome. Fraud on this scale demands enforcement, and those responsible should be held accountable. But the Minnesota scandal that helped spur the task force raises a deeper and perhaps even more troubling question. How did a system purportedly designed to help households operate for so long without confirming whether children were physically present and receiving services? In Minnesota, hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars intended to serve children were funneled through shell organizations, fake providers, and fabricated paperwork. This failure has been brought into sharp focus by investigative reporting from Nick Shirley, whose work has drawn national attention on how easily a system riddled with just intermediaries could be abused and fail the very people it was meant to serve. This failure should not be viewed as an isolated scandal or a uniquely Minnesotan problem. That is why the new task force is right to take a multi-state approach to ensure accountability elsewhere and to prevent similar abuses from taking root. But this also points to a broader flaw in how many social programs are designed and administered, particularly those built around centralized systems and elevate bureaucracy over people. The theory, the political left provides itself on championing the vulnerable. Yet, time and time again, it defends systems that harm or renders invisible the very people it claims to protect. Transparency and accountability are undermined when benefits are routed through layers of intermediaries. As bureaucratic systems grow more complex, they risk being detached from the people they claim to serve. When fraud occurs, it can grow rapidly because the distance between the dollar and the destination and this decision maker and the intended beneficiary is simply too great. The human costs of this approach are real. Every dollar siphoned off through fraud is a dollar not available to a hardworking taxpayer. Every layer of administrative bloat absorbs resources that never reach a household that could meaningfully benefit from it. This dynamic is embedded in how child care policy is approached more broadly. Policymakers often speak as though families are clamoring for more government-run daycare, but most parents prefer informal arrangements with relatives, friends, or trusted caregivers. Only a small share say a daycare center is the best environment for their child. Even when free, formal care is available nearby. Many working parents say they would prefer to reduce hours and spend more time with their children if the cost of living made that possible. Yet public policy routinely pushes families toward institutional models while undermining the kind of care they actually want. The Biden administration's priority legislation, Build Back Better, remember that? It exemplified this, steering billions of dollars away from taxpayers and families and to government approved industrial daycares. Overly restrictive regulation also contributes to this dynamic. Child care providers are often micromanaged with rules that have little connection to safety or child well-being, such as a rigid staff-to-child ratio requirements and detailed stipulations governing the number of type of toys, even how many balls of various sizes are required for a given number of children, making it harder for smaller providers to survive. The result has been a decline in home-based child care over the past decade, and even though it is often the most affordable and preferred option for families, parents feel trapped because these policies have narrowed their choices. Notably, many of these costly regulations do not statistically improve quality. Research consistently shows that certain mandates, such as rigid staff-to-child ratios, drive up prices without delivering measurable benefits for children. Ironically, oversight that actually matters, like verifying that services are delivered to real children, often fall by the wayside, as illustrated, obviously, in Minnesota. We see similar incentive programs and problems in other large public benefit programs, including Medicaid, when federal matching funds reward states that for how much they spend rather than how effectively they spent it. Aggressive fraud prevention offers these states little upside. Over time, systems expand and scrutiny weakens. Better policies can make fraud harder to commit in the first place, And just as importantly, though, those same policies create systems that better reflect how families actually live and lead to greater satisfaction. A more realistic and humane approach to child care policy begins by trusting parents to decide what care works for their children and reserving strict oversight for when it is truly needed. If policies focused on expanded supply, reduced unnecessary barriers, and allowed benefits to follow people rather than following through sprawling provider-centric systems, this kind of mass abuse would be much harder to execute. They would also align incentives and follow families to build care arrangements that actually fit their lives. The Minnesota scandal should prompt more oversight and transparency, but it should also prompt larger reforms. If lawmakers truly want to help families, the path toward a fewer rigid mandates, more real choices, and accountability that begins at the program's inception, before rampant fraud occurs and before public trust is lost. You see, that to me just seems very logical. I mean, but what it does is it illustrates so well what I said at the beginning of the podcast. And that is that when government gets involved in an industry, when government gets involved with a certain type of business, that is the beginning of the end for that industry, because then you're seeing these dollars go out to fraudulent things. You see the quality of that industry go downhill. I mean, we could give you example after example. I mean, look at healthcare, for instance. Government now very, very heavily involved in healthcare. Has our healthcare system really gotten that much better and less expensive? No, it hasn't. And so anyway, I have yet to have a person tell me one thing that the government does better than the private sector when it comes to things like this. And I would love to hear it. If you have one, I would love to hear it. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.